The seasons are turning again. We're moving now from autumn to winter with the arrival of the winter solstice. So, for us wild women, these turning of the seasons are so meaningful because each and every season has its realm of experience and opportunities to observe new things inside and out. Each season has different temperatures and textures and colors and flavors and scents, and all of those things affect us on a deeper level. So there's a lot to tune into at the time of winter solstice. So in this video, we're just going to begin to scratch the surface of what is available to us in winter as wild women. So I'd love to go over the wild woman archetype, talk about a couple of themes that motivate her, that are alive and well at this time of year. I want to talk about the winter solstice itself. What is there to notice, to sense, to learn, to play with? And then we're going to go over a practice for you to take with you, um, and explore outside of this video. So I would love if you could sit near to a window or take me on a walk, put me in your headphones, and be in relationship to the natural world. A lot of times this time of year it's cold outside, so we don't want to be outside without our cozies, without our jackets and scarves and boots and all of that. And if that's not available to you, that's totally fine. Just sit by a window so that as you're listening to this, there's a sense that you are observing how nature sort of dances with your experience, which it's always doing. We're always dancing with the world around us, and nature has a fun way of adding some dimension and, dare I say, magic to contemplations like these. So, do what you will, be where you want. Let's talk about the wild woman archetype to start. So, the Wild Woman Archetype was named the Wild Woman Archetype in this very revolutionary book that came out in the early 90s, written by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who is a Jungian analyst. I say Jungian analyst because that's where the archetype influence comes from. We'll talk about that in a second. She's also a cantadora, which is a keeper of the old stories. This book, we owe so much to this book. Anytime you hear the wild woman archetype, you can just know that that's where it came from. And I know that we talk about that book a lot at the Wild Woman Project. And that's because I would not have the language of the Wild Woman archetype without that book. So, what is an archetype? So, Carl Jung introduced sort of the archetypal psychology, or named the archetypal psychology, essentially saying that we have a collective unconscious. People have a collective unconscious that is full of a kind of ancient memory of stories, myths, world events that are sort of timeless and placeless, that happen over and over and over again. We can see archetypes played out in our around the holiday family table. We can see archetypes on the world stage. We can see archetypes in our favorite stories, from novels to movies and television shows, songs, folklore. That there are all of these kind of patterns of sorts of people that show up throughout time all over the world. And the wild woman archetype is one. You can think of the storyteller as an archetype, or the bard. You can think of the fool as an archetype, the queen, the hunter, the mystic, the soldier, the warrior, and on and on and on. There's so many archetypes. And again, they don't belong to any particular culture or region, but rather a set of patterns, psychological, behavioral patterns that show up again and again and again. So, wild woman archetype. What is the wild woman archetype? How do we identify her? So, one of the many, many ways uh, I think that we can find and sort of sniff out the wild woman archetype when we're looking for her in those stories and on the world stage and even in our own hearts. The wild woman archetype is a woman who bucks convention in order to follow her more wild instinct or her wild heart. And that's said very simply, but it's a big task. It takes a lot to um, say, I'm going to walk a different way. Everyone around me, the culture around me is telling me this is how to do X, Y, Z, and I'd rather do it like this. Something deep inside of me tells me I want to do it like this. And the courage it takes to go the path less traveled, to to find your own way. What happens to a person when they don't go the way of everyone else in civilization, which is essentially means, of the city, and they go a different way, a wilder way, a way that's, of the mountains and of the moss and of the stones and of the deserts and of the oceans, goes a different kind of a way. It takes a lot. And one quality that I think is very, very strong with the wild woman archetype that is very universal is courage. Courage. It takes a lot of courage to go your own way. It takes a lot of courage in a sort of modern world to walk closer and closer to the earth, you know, for example. So there are so many ways that this sort of archetypal thing of a woman, this archetypal story of a woman who is born in a certain place with a certain set of norms. She breaks those norms and she goes a wilder path, the path of her wild heart. You know, immediately I was thinking this morning of Artemis from the Greek mythology, thought of Durga from the Hindu mythology. I thought of Jane Goodall, Maya Angelou. And maybe you can think of a person in your life that's not necessarily like a famous or mythical person, but a person that you love that is a woman who bucked the convention of her time and went her own way, followed her own wild heart. And very often, you're going to see courage. They have to be brave. And it doesn't mean that they're not scared, but the love for whatever is drawing their wild heart in whatever way, it's usually some form of love of something they're not finding in the world they were born in, but that they have to seek out to find. So it's the call of the wild heart, and it takes a ton and ton of courage. And when a woman walks like this, and maybe this is you, maybe this has been you at certain moments, pivotal moments in your life. When you step out to go your own way, there's a sense that there's less certainty, right? Because here's the paved path. You do X and Y, Z, and here you're going on this wild path that's really, truly so full of mystery, so full of uncertainty that moment by moment, it asks of the wild woman, because she's putting herself in this situation, right? Where there are no maps, she has to make her own map as she goes. So she has to be extremely alive and extremely awake, moment by moment by moment. So, this alive, awake state helps her to be brave, helps her to kind of roll and flow with whatever the path brings, whatever she finds on her way. And I've been thinking a lot recently about what seems to me to be in our collective experience right now a kind of epidemic of certainty. An epidemic of certainty that there are so many, perhaps so many people, perhaps sort of like emboldened by the amount of information, that we have at our fingertips, like never before. I don't have to tell you this, but it's worth just taking a moment every now and then to be like, whoa, what we're working with at this particular moment in time when it comes to like just sheer amount of information. It's just something to keep in mind as this huge new piece of being human, and it's very new. So for those of us who are alive right now, we're figuring out how to be with all of this. But this thing of certainty, and what I think is really an illusion of certainty, because there's so much knowledge, there's so much, like, you can find little facts, you can find lots of little facts here and there. You don't have to sit and ponder and wander and try to remember something. You just boop, um, boop, there's the fact. I don't have, when you sit there and you're wandering and you're thinking about it, there is an openness in the mind that happens. Whereas when every piece of information is there, it's boom, boom, boom. It's just a different kind of feel inside. There's a different feeling going on. I feel like I'm getting a little abstract here. So let me ground this just a little bit. So, certainty versus uncertainty, or I should say, certainty versus mystery. It is true that we have access to so many facts. It is also true that those facts do not answer some of the biggest questions that human beings have been asking for all of recorded history. Things like, what happens when we die? What's the point of life? What are we doing here? What's our place, as Mary Oliver would say, in the family of things? Like, there's a lot that's in the mystery. And I think one of the gifts of the wild woman archetype in modern times is that she is connected to the fact that so much of life is mysterious. There is so much uncertainty, even where you think there's certainty. Even if you go the path that of your culture, do everything that the people around you have taught you to do, there's still uncertainty in that. It is a given. There is no certainty, but we human beings, it's like, it's this thing that makes us feel really, really, really safe. I think when we think about something, so we can be certain about something, that's like a little safety blanket that we can wrap around ourselves. Well, at least I know this. At least this is going to happen if X. And it's like, it's a little bit delusional, but kind of sweet, like the stories that we tell ourselves about what is certain. But if there's been anything that has come out of these last few years of being human together on this planet, is this wake up call that there is no certainty, that there is a ton of mystery, that things can change like this. The wild woman archetype, when we tune into her, right? When we tune into her, we can tune into the part of ourselves that's like her, the part of ourselves that can be courageous in the face of mystery, can be courageous in the face of uncertainty and the reality of uncertainty, and can say, can call a spade, that it is all uncertainty and life is best lived step by step by step. That's the only way you can do it, as much as we try to think forward, it's really a breath by breath, step by step, day by day, small action by small action, little word, little conversation by conversation, moving forward through life. And the wild woman archetype reminds us, it reminds me that the wild heart can be like a light on the path, can be a light on the path, moment by moment, noticing where the wild heart is drawn, and that there's some kind of a wisdom, something to be listened to there. Let's talk now about winter solstice. So, winter solstice is the longest night of the whole year. It's the shortest day. There is an abundance of nighttime. An abundance of nighttime. So, if nature is a spiritual teacher, what are the lessons being taught now? That's a question to walk with on the day of the solstice and on every single day of winter. And I promise you, if you put that little question in your pocket and you take it on a walk or you look out the window every single day, you can find a new lesson. So, what's going on at winter solstice? If you compare the cycles of the earth and sun to the cycle of the earth and moon, much smaller, the winter solstice is kin to the new moon time. So if you've been hanging out with the Wild Woman Project for a while, you know that we make an enormous deal out of the new moon time. Most of our Wild Woman Project circles that happen all around the world are happening around new moon time. So it's a lot of similar themes. The new moon is the one day of the moon cycle where you cannot see the moon in the sky. It's darkness. So if nature is spiritual teacher, what is being taught? What is being taught? So what are the gifts of darkness? What are the experiences available in darkness? What happens in darkness? What doesn't happen in darkness? And we can all sort of individually ask a very personal question, which is, what is our relationship to physical darkness? to physical darkness. What happens to us in physical darkness? I've spent a lot of the autumn researching the pre Christian rituals that were happening in ancient Greece, right at the dawn of actually Christianity, and right as sort of the Western civilization was being formed. There were these rituals that were happening largely underground, where people would have revelatory, mystical, visionary experiences during these underground rituals. It's also true that all around the world, ancient cultures would have various practices, various reasons, and ways, I should say, various ways of going underground or into caves, into caverns, in order to do specifically spiritual work, ritual, in some cases, art making, and all kinds of these sort of spiritual practices underground, in cave, in the dark. It's definitely worth our contemplation as modern human beings with electricity and access to an abundance of light, where we're really not getting the level of darkness at all of, people even living 50 years ago, 100 years ago, certainly 200 years ago, and way beyond. I mean, imagine these ancient people who had no access to, modern electricity, were like, it's not dark enough outside to do this ritual. We got to go darker. We got to go underground, into these caves, into this darkness. And why? It's worth our time as modern women to spend some time with darkness, to ask ourselves, what happens to me in a space where light is limited and darkness is abundant? I think in a lot of ways, this is sort of why I started talking about this quality, one of many qualities the Wild Woman archetype has, but it's that thing of courage. And to sit in the dark, to be with dark, takes courage. I mean, there are some places, some caves that you can go to, and you can't see your hand in front of your face. It is so dark. What does that take, And what does that do? So nature offers us in the winter solstice this experience of darkness. So what do we learn? What do we sense? What do you see? What are the teachings? What are the lessons that you can sense? One of the things that I appreciate about walking with the Wild Woman archetype is that there is no shoulding happening from any kind of dogma. It's not like, this is what the winter solstice means, X, Y, Z. These are this is it, this is it, this is it. Now you can go and study different ancient cultures around the world, and they all have different sort of opinions and thoughts and rituals and ideas and mythologies created around these things. They're absolutely, especially for the wild-hearted among us, fascinating and maybe deeply meaningful, but are not, necessary to have a direct experience with life, which is actually my favorite word for spirit, or is just life. So the Wild Woman archetype really allows us to be centered in our own wisdom that comes through our own experiences, And it can just be helpful to have questions that we ask together, because it's nice to have community to talk about these kinds of things. But I want you to feel like confident and secure that when you look outside, when you go for a walk on the winter solstice, when you have your time, if you decide to ask yourself that question, if nature's spiritual teacher, what is the teaching, that you trust whatever answer bubbles up for you as the right answer for you for right now, and worthy of your heart and of your mind and of your attention. So, I'd love to offer you a winter solstice practice. So I'm just going to offer it, and then you're going to do with it whatever you please beyond this video. So the invitation is this: find the darkest place you can find. Now, this might be a closet where you close the door and you maybe put a towel or cushions or something against the little crack underneath the door, so that absolutely no light comes in, right? And go in there with a candle and a matchbook or a lighter, but don't light it yet. So you're going to sit in the darkness. You're going to allow yourself to sit in the darkness so you can see what you feel, what you experience when you're in the total dark, in the mystery, sitting, like I think of it like sitting at the edge of knowledge, sitting right beyond certainty, sitting in the mystery, sitting in the unknown, sitting in the dark. And you can set a timer. You could do it for 3 minutes or 7 minutes, or you're feeling really courageous, you can set it for 21 minutes or half of an hour, whatever you have space and desire to do, okay? And you're going to sit and you're going to breathe and you're going to be. You can ponder those questions of what is the lesson of the darkest day of the year? What is my relationship to physical darkness? And any other juicy questions, and anything else you feel guided to do in that dark space. But I'll say, stay in touch with your breath, see what you sense. And if it's helpful, you can imagine your heart having a kind of luminosity to it, a heart light in the dark. And then when you get towards the end of your time, please light your candle so you can notice what a little bit of light does in a very dark space, what a little tiny candle can do to a cave. So have fun with that practice. And, happy winter, happy new year, happy all the holidays. I am wishing you all the best for you and yours. And if there's lots of cool things happening in the new year, we have Wild Woman Underground, which is an ongoing offering. We meet every single week, and you can join live or you can enjoy the recordings. We have our own little app where we communicate between sessions and share pictures and stories and ask questions and resources. And inside of that app is almost a year's worth of backlogged gatherings. So this is classes and circles and practices and meditations. So you get all of that when you sign up. We have monthly memberships, and we just added annual memberships where you can get a pretty steep discount. So if that sounds like something you want to do, please join us. Come try it on. We'd love to have you. Then we have spring circle leader training coming. So if the thought of training to facilitate a Wild Woman Project circle in your local community sounds exciting to you, see the link below this video. We're about to announce the spring 2024 dates, and you'll want to put those on your calendar and make sure to note when registration opens. It tends to fill pretty fast. And then, of course, in the summertime, which seems like a very far time away, but it'll be here before you know it. In August, we have Wild Woman Fest. And talk about a ritual. It's many days. If you want to dance around a fire, howl at the moon, do a ritual, hang out with other wild women from all paths of life, you are very welcome to check that out. Tickets will open sometime in the spring. Last year we sold out in 4 minutes. So if that's something that you really want to do, just pay really close attention to the emails. You can sign up for updates. I'll put, again, a link under this video. And then you can always find a Wild Woman Project circle near you. We have them now in 25 countries around the world, 43 out of the 50 United States, where a trained facilitator holds space regularly for wild women. So you can find one near you. Thank you so much. Happy wild womaning this winter solstice.